I never thought a single evening could change everything I believed about my family. I had just finished setting the table for dinner when my phone rang, the kind of call that feels heavier than any ordinary conversation. It was from the hospital. My son, he'd been in an accident. A car had hit him, and the doctors said he was in critical condition. I froze. My hands trembled, and my heart pounded in ways I didn't think it could. I ran to the car, keys barely fitting in the ignition as my mind raced. The drive was a blur, each red light dragging longer than the last. When I finally arrived, I found him lying there, pale and barely conscious, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily, marking every fragile moment. The nurses stepped aside, but one of them paused, looked at me with a caution that I hadn't expected, and said, "We need his medical history, any conditions, medications, anything at all. It's urgent." My chest tightened. My son had never been forthcoming about some things. I opened my mouth to speak, but then, the truth hit me. There were things he had hidden, things that, if I had known, could have made the difference. My hands shook as I flipped through the emergency forms, searching for anything. His files were incomplete. Certain critical details were missing. The doctor looked at me with gentle urgency. "We can stabilize him, but we need accurate information. Any secrets we don't know could cost him his life." Every word felt like a weight pressing on me. I had raised him, known him, loved him, and yet there was something he had kept from me. I sat by his bedside, gripping his hand, trying to steady my own breath while the reality pressed down. How could he hide something so vital? I had always prided myself on our honesty, our closeness. The thought that he could withhold something life-threatening was unbearable. My mind replayed the last few weeks, every conversation, every quiet moment, trying to find a clue, a hint of what he might have been hiding. I remembered seeing him wince while lifting boxes at home, a sudden pause when reaching for something heavy, but I'd thought it was normal, just minor aches. Now those little signs gnawed at me, and guilt swept in, sharp and immediate. The doctor returned, eyes searching mine. "Do you know if he's allergic to anything? Any medication reactions? Any previous heart or blood issues?" I shook my head slowly. I don't know. He didn't tell me. The words felt like a betrayal, though I knew better than to call it that in my own mind. It was fear, raw and pure, twisting every memory. Every nurse, every machine, every beeping monitor became a reminder of what was at stake. My son's life depended on secrets he had chosen to keep, and I felt powerless, hours stretched painfully. The medical team worked efficiently, voices calm but decisive, each step a reminder of how fragile life could be. I sat there, wishing I could turn back time, wishing I could undo the moments I hadn't noticed, hadn't questioned, hadn't asked. I felt tears rolling down, but I forced myself to stay composed, because panic wouldn't save him. I tried to remember every conversation, every visit, every symptom I might have dismissed at one point. My son stirred slightly, opening his eyes, weak but aware. I leaned close, voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? How could you hide this?" He coughed softly, barely audible, and looked away. That tiny gesture said more than words ever could. I realized then that this wasn't just an accident. It was part of a bigger secret he had been carrying. A truth so heavy that he thought no one could help him, that he had to bear it alone. The doctors finally called a meeting. They outlined the risks, the procedures, and then paused. "There's one problem," the lead physician said, his tone careful but firm. "We don't have the full medical picture. There's something critical missing in his history." My stomach dropped. I looked at my son, lying there, fragile, trusting me without even knowing. I felt the weight of every unspoken word, every hidden moment, and the terrifying thought hit me. If I had known, I could have acted sooner. If I had known, I could have saved him from this. That night, sitting beside his bed, I watched him sleep, machines humming softly. I vowed to find out the secret, to understand why he had hidden it, and to make sure it never endangered him again. And in that quiet hospital room, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of machines, I realized the story of my son's life and mine was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. Something had been kept from me, and until I uncovered it, I could not truly save him. For as long as I could remember, my life had been a constant balancing act, walking the fine line between responsibility and exhaustion. Every morning began before the sun had even thought of rising. I would wake to the quiet hum of the city outside, pull on a robe, and tiptoe into the kitchen to make breakfast. My son, even at a young age, had always been a light sleeper, and I hated waking him with the clatter of pans, so I learned to move silently, letting the sizzling of eggs and the drip of the kettle mark the passage of time. I had worked hard all my life, not just in the sense of earning money, though that was part of it. I had worked in raising children, in keeping a home together, in making sure that every small fracture in our family's life was mended before anyone else noticed. There were days I barely recognized myself in the mirror, with the faint lines forming around my eyes and the dullness of fatigue pressing into my shoulders. Yet, I carried on, driven by love and duty, believing that everything I did was worth it. If my family could have comfort, stability, and happiness, my son had always been observant, quieter than most, but thoughtful in a way that made you notice him even in a crowded room. He was careful, intelligent, and more sensitive than he ever let on. I had tried to teach him the values I had learned the hard way: honesty, responsibility, kindness, but sometimes I worried that I had been too protective, too cautious, or too controlling. I wanted to shield him from pain, from mistakes, from the moments in life that could leave invisible scars. But I also wanted him to grow, to make choices, to navigate the world with his own sense of morality. In our house, routines were sacred. Mornings were for getting ready, afternoons for schoolwork or small chores, and evenings were for meals together. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and moments when the silence between us seemed longer than it should be. But there was also laughter, small victories, and the quiet pride of seeing my children grow into capable, independent individuals. I had believed that my son would come to me with anything, that the bond we shared was strong enough to withstand almost anything. I thought I had raised him to trust me, to rely on me when he needed help, yet I now understood that there were depths to him I had never explored, layers he had hidden carefully, and secrets he had carried alone. He had always been reserved about certain parts of his life: his health, his feelings, his fears, but I assumed it was just adolescent privacy, something temporary, something that would fade with time. I never imagined it could be life-threatening. I never imagined that the very trust I believed we had built could be overshadowed by his silence. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. The way he would sometimes avoid certain foods or exercises, how he occasionally paused mid-task, a shadow passing over his face for a moment before he forced a smile. I had been too busy, too involved in the endless demands of life, to pay close attention. Each small oversight now felt like a breadcrumb on a trail I had missed, leading to this moment of crisis. My guilt was suffocating. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every careful plan I had made to protect him now felt insufficient, but our daily life had not been only struggles. There had been moments of pure joy. I remembered the evenings we spent quietly in the living room, him doing homework while I knitted or read, the way he would look up and smile, asking a question, sharing a thought. I remembered birthday mornings filled with pancakes and laughter, school projects brought home with pride, and small victories celebrated with ice cream and hugs. Those memories were treasures, and I clung to them. Even as fear and worry gripped me, I had worked hard to give him a life where he could thrive, where mistakes would not be fatal, where love and guidance were constants. Yet, here I was, sitting in a sterile hospital room, realizing that all my efforts, all my planning, had not been enough to prevent the danger he now faced. It was a bitter truth. No matter how much we try, children carry their own burdens, sometimes silently. And even the most devoted parent cannot always see or protect against every risk. The hospital visits became our new routine, a stark contrast to the life we had known. Days that once began with coffee and sunlight now began with fear and uncertainty. I would watch him sleep, study his face for any signs of pain or distress, and silently pray for the strength to navigate whatever he was hiding. I tried to talk to him gently, asking questions, offering reassurance, but he would deflect, nodding or changing the subject, as though the very act of speaking about it was impossible. During those days, I also reflected on the sacrifices I had made for our family. I had put aside personal ambitions, taken jobs that were manageable rather than fulfilling, and endured long, lonely nights to ensure our children could have opportunities I had never known. Each sacrifice had been worth it, I told myself, but now I realized that love alone could not fill the gaps created by secrets. Trust, communication, and honesty were just as essential. And those were the things my son had withheld. I began to notice patterns, small routines, behaviors that hinted at a deeper struggle. A quick glance at a medical app on his phone, a hidden note in his room, a hesitation when certain words were mentioned. Each fragment of information was a clue. I felt like a detective in my own home, piecing together a puzzle I hadn't known existed. The more I tried to understand, the more I realized how much responsibility had been placed on my shoulders. Not just to care for him, but to uncover the truth he had chosen to keep, even amidst all this. Life continued to move in its quiet, relentless way. The city outside my window went on with its ordinary rhythms, cars honking, people talking, children laughing while I sat in the hospital or at home, navigating a world filled with unseen dangers and concealed truths. I longed for normalcy, for a return to simple routines, but I knew that nothing could restore the innocence we once had. Every choice, every hidden detail now carried weight, and the consequences of ignorance had become painfully clear. I began documenting everything, jotting down observations, questions, and moments of concern. Each note was a lifeline, a way to regain some control, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with reality. I also spoke quietly to friends I trusted, seeking advice, learning about the conditions he might be hiding, and trying to anticipate what could come next. The process was exhausting, both emotionally and physically, but I had no choice. My son's life depended on understanding the unseen, the unspoken, the secret he had carried alone. At home, small routines became more meaningful. Preparing meals, tidying rooms, even folding laundry, all of it was done with a renewed sense of care, as though these small acts of order and attention could somehow counterbalance the chaos that the secret had introduced. I spoke to him in soft tones, offering reassurance without pressure, hoping he would eventually trust me enough to reveal what he had been keeping hidden. Each day was a delicate negotiation between patience and urgency, between love and fear. Evenings were the hardest. When the house fell quiet, the stillness amplified my worry. I would sit alone, replaying moments in my mind, trying to find clues I had overlooked. The laughter of other families outside became a reminder of what could have been taken for granted. Each day was a blend of hope and anxiety, a careful walk along an emotional tightrope where one misstep could mean disaster. And yet, through all this, there was resilience. I saw it in him, in the smallest gestures, a hint of a smile, a willingness to discuss mundane things, a fleeting moment of trust. I reminded myself constantly that these fragments mattered. They were signs that, despite the secret and the risk, he had the ability to confront reality, to face the consequences, and to survive. Our daily life, though transformed, had become a mix of vigilance and compassion. I had learned to listen without judgment, to observe without interference, and to hold hope even when it seemed impossible. Every sacrifice, every moment of quiet observation, and every conversation had built a foundation upon which the truth could eventually emerge. It was painstaking, but necessary. For a mother, nothing else mattered more than understanding, protecting, and guiding her child even when the child had chosen to hide the most critical parts of their life. The days stretched into weeks, and the tension in our home became almost tangible. It wasn't just the accident or the medical uncertainties anymore. It was the invisible barrier my son had built between us. Every question I asked, every attempt to probe gently into what he was hiding, seemed to bounce off an invisible wall. He would nod, smile faintly, or change the subject, leaving me grasping at fragments of information that refused to form a whole picture. The silence weighed heavier than any argument or confrontation could have. I began noticing how he carefully curated his actions, how he avoided certain topics, and how he seemed to calculate his words as though every conversation carried enormous risk. It wasn't overt rebellion or defiance, it was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I could feel the control he exerted over the situation, not through force, but through omission. By keeping me in the dark, he controlled my ability to act, to intervene, to prevent harm. That realization hit me with a mix of frustration, fear, and heartbreak. I was his mother. I had spent my life protecting him. And yet, here he was, deliberately denying me the means to do so. I tried every approach. I spoke calmly, gently, framing my questions as concern rather than accusation. I reminded him of the countless times I had been there for him, the ways I had supported him through childhood, school, and adolescence. I offered reassurance, explaining that knowing the truth wouldn't change my love or my care for him, it would only allow me to help. Still, he remained guarded. It was as if there were layers to his secrecy, each more opaque than the last. And each layer intensified the emotional pressure I felt. Sometimes, when I tried to press further, he would retreat entirely, withdrawing into his room, shutting the door, leaving me to grapple with anxiety alone. Other times, he would answer with vague statements, words chosen carefully to mislead without lying outright. The emotional imbalance was exhausting. I felt helpless, trapped by my own care and his silence. Every meal shared, every casual conversation, became a minefield, and I walked carefully, knowing that one wrong word might push him further into isolation. The more I tried to understand, the more I realized I had to control my own emotions first. If I showed panic or desperation, he would shut down completely. I had to remain calm, composed, patient, even as the fear gnawed at me from the inside. Nights were the hardest. Lying awake, listening to the faint sounds of the house, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. Every unspoken truth, every withheld detail, became a barrier between my son and the help he needed. And I knew, deep down, that the longer this went on, the higher the stakes would rise. I began observing him in ways I hadn't before. Small habits, minute behaviors, and fleeting reactions became my clues. A wince while lifting something, a pause when a certain topic arose, an unusual pattern in his daily routine. Each moment hinted at something hidden. Yet, no matter how careful I was, there was always that nagging doubt. Was I missing something crucial? Did I overlook a warning sign that could make all the difference? At times, I questioned myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being too intrusive? But then I remembered the accident, the doctor's urgency, the incomplete files, the moments when I felt powerless beside his hospital bed. That memory burned in my mind like a warning. This wasn't ordinary secrecy. This was something that could threaten his life, and every moment of delay mattered. I had to find the courage to confront the truth, even if it meant breaking the fragile walls of silence he had built. There were moments when he tested the boundaries without realizing it. A casual mention of medications, a question about diet, a sudden reluctance to participate in a simple household task, all of these became sources of tension. I realized that, intentionally or not, he was holding control over the situation in ways that forced me to navigate carefully. I could not act impulsively. Every step had to be measured, every word deliberate. Because if I pushed too hard, I risked losing any chance of access to the truth he held so tightly. I tried speaking to him indirectly, sharing stories of others I had known who had faced health crises, hoping he would relate and open up. Sometimes it worked for a few moments. A small nod, a quiet response. But then, the moment passed, and he would retreat again, as though the brief flicker of connection had reminded him why secrecy was necessary. Each attempt to break through was a delicate balance between encouragement and respect for his autonomy. The tension didn't remain confined to our conversations. It spilled into the atmosphere at home, coloring every interaction. I found myself walking on eggshells, choosing my words carefully, avoiding topics that might provoke resistance, yet always searching for a way to understand. My emotions oscillated between frustration, fear, sadness, and a quiet determination. Each day was a test of patience, of endurance, and of love. Even in the smallest moments, the power imbalance was apparent. He had the information, the key to his own safety, and I did not. That simple fact created a psychological tension I had never anticipated. I realized that being his mother did not automatically grant me access to the knowledge I needed. He had made choices that put me in a position of dependence, and I had no choice but to accept it. It was an uneasy, emotionally draining reality. I found solace in small victories. A fleeting moment of trust, a hint of disclosure, a shared laugh that reminded me of our bond. All of these became precious. They kept me anchored in the belief that eventually, the truth would come to light. I had to maintain control over my own reactions, to stay calm even when fear threatened to consume me. Because any sign of desperation might drive him further away, internal conflict grew stronger with every passing day. I wanted to demand answers, to force him to reveal what he had hidden. Yet, I knew that doing so could jeopardize the very relationship that might ultimately save him. I wrestled with my emotions constantly, trying to find the line between urgency and respect, between fear and patience. Each day felt like a battle with invisible forces: love, responsibility, and the power of a secret kept tightly in the hands of someone I had raised. And all the while, the unspoken truth hung over us like a shadow. I could sense it in the way he moved, in the careful phrasing of his sentences, in the occasional hesitation. That shadow created a pressure that was relentless, unyielding, and exhausting. But it also steeled me, reminding me that I had to persevere, that I had to find a way to navigate the delicate balance between respect for his choices and the imperative to save him. Every interaction, every conversation, every glance carried weight. I had become hyper-aware of his moods, his reactions, and his silences. I had to anticipate, to deduce, to read between lines. My own emotions had to remain in check, even as my heart ached with worry and frustration. The stakes were high, and I knew that one misstep could cost him everything. The control he held over the situation was subtle but complete. By withholding crucial information, he dictated the pace, the access, and even the emotional state of those around him. I was trapped in a delicate dance, forced to adapt, to observe, and to respond with care. Every day tested my patience, my resolve, and my understanding of what it truly meant to love unconditionally. Yet, despite the mounting tension, there were glimmers of hope. Brief moments when he allowed me a small window into his world. Times when his guard dropped just enough for me to see the person he was beneath the secrecy. Those moments were fragile, but they were proof that connection was still possible. They reminded me that even in the midst of manipulation, silence, and control, love and trust could survive. I understood then that this period of tension, of withheld truths, was shaping us both. It was teaching me patience I hadn't known I possessed, insight into his inner world I hadn't been able to reach before, and the need to navigate the fine line between urgency and empathy. Each day was a lesson in restraint, observation, and the quiet power of love that does not demand, but persists. Waiting for the right moment to act, it all came to a head one quiet evening, weeks after the initial accident. I had grown accustomed to the tension, to the constant shadow of uncertainty, and to the painstaking observation of every gesture, every glance, every subtle movement my son made. But that night, something felt different. There was a quiet stillness in the house, one that carried a weight heavier than usual. I was folding laundry in the living room when I noticed a folder peeking from under the sofa cushions, one I hadn't seen before. It was worn, edges bent, but it called to me in a way that nothing else had. I hesitated for a moment, heart pounding, knowing this could change everything. I reached for it and opened it carefully, afraid of what I might find. Inside were medical documents, lab results, and notes, details he had hidden from me all along. My hands shook as I read the words, the chemical names, the conditions, the warnings that had gone unspoken. Everything became clear in that instant. The pain he had tried to conceal, the precautions he had failed to take, the minor symptoms I had ignored, they were all pieces of a puzzle I had been desperate to solve. The documents revealed a condition that had been silently escalating, one that, without proper management, could have turned fatal. I read and reread the notes, trying to steady my racing heart. Every omission, every carefully hidden detail, now explained the subtle behaviors I had noticed over the past weeks. The avoidance of certain foods, the hesitation during physical activity, the slight pauses and winces, all of it made sense. My son had been carrying this burden alone, believing somehow that secrecy was the safest course, and in doing so, he had prevented me from intervening when it could have mattered most. I confronted him gently that night, the folder in my hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly, sitting beside him on his bed. His eyes flickered briefly, a mixture of guilt, fear, and something I couldn't immediately name. He looked away, fidgeting with the corner of the blanket, and for a moment, I thought he might not respond at all. Then he spoke, almost in a whisper, explaining that he had feared burdening me, feared judgment, and above all, feared that I might worry endlessly without being able to do anything to help him. His words hit me in a way I hadn't anticipated. There was no malice, no attempt to deceive for selfish gain. There was only fear, isolation, and the belief that he had to carry this alone. And yet, the consequence of that fear had been nearly catastrophic. I felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and profound relief that I had finally found the truth before it was too late. I held the documents close, realizing that knowledge was power, and that for the first time in weeks, I had a chance to act decisively. The next hours were a whirlwind of phone calls, consultations, and urgent arrangements. I contacted specialists, scheduled appointments, and ensured he received the care he had been silently avoiding. Each step felt like reclaiming control, each action a reversal of the helplessness I had endured. He followed instructions quietly, the weight of the revelation pressing on him as much as it did on me. It was a delicate dance, guiding him through the process while managing my own emotions, relief, fear, and a lingering sadness for the days lost to secrecy during the confrontation. There was a turning point beyond the documents themselves. I saw in him a willingness to finally trust, to open a door he had kept closed for so long. He spoke of the nights he had spent worrying alone, the decisions he had made in isolation, and the fear that his condition would somehow define him. I listened without interruption, allowing him to express the layers of his struggle, to voice what had remained silent. It was raw, it was fragile, but it was necessary. The walls he had built were coming down, brick by careful brick, that night. I realized the full weight of parenthood, the responsibility not just to provide, but to understand, to observe, and to navigate the complexities of secrecy that children sometimes feel forced to carry. It was a revelation in more ways than one. Not only had I discovered the truth about his condition, but I had also learned the delicate art of patience, empathy, and the quiet insistence that love persists even in the face of concealment. In the days that followed, a new rhythm emerged. He began to share, in small, careful ways, the nuances of his experience. The medications, the symptoms, the moments of pain he had endured silently all became part of a dialogue we had never had before. Each disclosure was like lifting a veil, allowing me to finally guide him towards safety and recovery. The emotional confrontation had shifted the balance of control, giving me the information I needed and granting him a sense of security that had been missing for weeks. Through this process, I also discovered the depth of his resilience. Despite fear, shame, and the instinct to hide, he had survived. He had managed his own challenges until he finally trusted me enough to share. And in that trust, I found the quiet power of connection, the realization that even in secrecy, the bond between parent and child could endure, transform, and ultimately heal. The documents, the conversations, the care plans, they were more than tools for survival. They represented a bridge between isolation and support, fear and reassurance, secrecy and truth. In seeing the full picture, I could act decisively, ensuring his life was not only protected, but guided with the love and vigilance I had always promised him. By the end of that week, the emotional atmosphere in the house had shifted. The tension that had dominated our interactions eased slightly, replaced with cautious openness. There were moments of laughter, small smiles shared over meals, and evenings where he would speak freely about minor aches, diet, or plans for the next day. These were small victories, subtle but profound, marking a turning point where knowledge had restored a measure of safety and control to both of us. And yet, I understood that the revelation carried a responsibility that would not fade. Knowledge alone was not enough. It had to be applied with care, diligence, and patience. I had to remain vigilant, compassionate, and firm, guiding him without taking away his autonomy, protecting him without overstepping, and supporting him without allowing the past secrecy to define our future. That night, as I watched him rest peacefully, I felt a quiet triumph. The secret that had almost cost him his life was now out in the open, and the path forward was clear. The power had shifted not in dominance, but in understanding. The bridge between us, once fractured by fear and omission, was now being rebuilt, one careful, truthful step at a time. I had uncovered the truth, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my ability to save him, not through anger or coercion, but through empathy, patience, and unwavering love. The days after the revelation moved slowly, deliberately, as if the world itself had taken a deep breath along with me. The hospital visits became less frantic, less desperate. The doctors had a clear plan now, a regimen my son could follow, and a monitoring system that would keep him safe. I watched him closely, not with suspicion, but with care. Every small step in his recovery was a victory, and every honest word he spoke was a bond renewed. Our home, once tense and weighted with unspoken truths, began to breathe again. Meals were shared without the silent fear lingering at the edges, and conversations, though cautious, were more open. I noticed subtle changes in him, confidence growing, shadows of fear lifting, and a willingness to trust not just in the medical plan, but in me. It was a quiet justice of sorts. The secret that had once endangered him no longer held power. Knowledge, understanding, and vigilance had restored balance. He began helping around the house more, small gestures that indicated a shift in his awareness. He asked for advice about daily routines, shared minor health updates without prompting, and even laughed at moments I hadn't heard for weeks. Each small act carried emotional weight for me. It was the proof that he had learned the value of trust, that he could survive vulnerability, and that our bond had endured the strain of secrecy and fear. In those moments, I reflected on what had transpired. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public display of anger or relief, only the steady, unspoken recognition that life is fragile, trust is vital, and communication can be the difference between danger and safety. I thought about all the nights spent awake, watching him sleep, replaying moments, questioning every detail. Every ounce of worry had been a crucible, forging patience, resilience, and understanding I hadn't known I possessed. I realized that quiet justice often comes not through punishment or retribution, but through awareness and care. My son had been spared harm because, at the right moment, the truth was uncovered and applied wisely. He had carried a burden alone, but now he no longer had to. And I, as his mother, had reclaimed my role not as an enforcer of control, but as a guide, a protector, and a safe place for honesty and vulnerability. Our interactions returned to a rhythm that was both tender and grounded. I listened more than I spoke, offering guidance without pressing, support without hovering. He responded with cautious gratitude, and in small ways, the weight of the past weeks lifted. I felt the tension that had dominated our home dissolve into a calm vigilance, a state of readiness without fear, of care without anxiety. It was the emotional balance I had sought all along. I also reflected on the lessons this experience had given me. Parenthood is not only about providing, protecting, and guiding. It is also about observing, understanding, and navigating the complexities of human secrecy and pride. My son's silence had tested me, but it had also revealed depths of patience and insight I hadn't realized I could reach. In responding with empathy rather than anger, I had reinforced trust, nurtured resilience, and safeguarded life. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations of victory. Instead, there were quiet nights with conversations about daily life, gentle reminders about health, and moments when he would allow me a small window into his experiences. The secret that had threatened everything had been transformed into a foundation for honesty, care, and mutual respect. It was justice, but it was calm, emotionally earned, and quietly powerful. Weeks later, as he returned to normal routine school, work, social activities, there was a subtle shift in our household. The fear that had once lingered like a shadow was replaced by trust. He no longer withheld critical details, and I no longer had to guess or observe silently. We had established a balance of honesty, care, and understanding that carried the quiet dignity of earned experience. In reflecting on everything, I understood that true resolution doesn't always come with dramatic confrontation or explosive emotion. Sometimes it comes through knowledge, patience, and the steady application of care. My son had survived his secret not because of luck, but because we had navigated the complexity of fear and love together. And in doing so, our relationship grew stronger, more resilient, and more deeply rooted in trust. I finally allowed myself to rest, knowing that the most dangerous part of the past had passed. The secret, once a barrier between us, had been transformed into a lesson about honesty, responsibility, and the power of quiet vigilance. I looked at my son, watching him move through his day with renewed energy and openness. And I felt an overwhelming sense of calm triumph, not one of victory over him, but of understanding, protection, and unconditional love fulfilled. Life returned to its ordinary rhythms, but it carried the weight of lessons learned and bonds strengthened. The hospital visits faded, the fears became memories rather than present threats, and the quiet justice of understanding replaced the chaos of secrecy. My son's life had been preserved, not through force or anger, but through careful observation, patient persistence, and the courage to uncover what had been hidden. And as I watched him, fully alive and cautiously trusting, I realized something profound. Love, patience, and quiet diligence can confront even the most stubborn secrecy. They can restore balance, protect life, and foster trust in ways that loud action or confrontation never could. It was a calm, earned justice, and it left a lasting imprint on both of us, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, care, observation, and empathy are the strongest forces of all.